Thank you so much. All right, so as I said, I actually am the speaker. I want to kind of get a pulse on how we're feeling today. I know that for people it's the evening, we're in different time zones. So go ahead in the chat box, and if you can just kind of tell me how your day is going, give me some insights into how you're feeling and tell me how your day has been going so far. Go ahead and use that chat box. See what answers we got.
You guys can
use that chat box.
Post your views. Yeah, you guys can post your views in chat room.
We're going to be using the chat box quite a bit for this session. So you want to be able to, well, thank you very much. If you guys want to, again, I am the speaker, so I'm trying to get a pulse on how you all are feeling today. So if you can just give me some descriptions on how your day has been going. Give me a couple descriptive words. I'm looking for a couple more interested in this topic. All right. That's some feedback. That's a little bit of feedback that I'm getting. Actually, I think I'll give you, I think I'm going to give you a 4 out of 10 on that feedback. So I got some responses. So there is a 4 out of 10, but I think that we can do a little bit better. So I'm actually going to ask the question one more time. So if you can use the chat box, or you can speak as well. If you can give me a little bit of feedback, tell me how your day is going. Give me a pulse on how you're feeling as an audience member. If you can give me some feedback in terms of, how are you feeling? You're feeling enlightened even more. All right. Let's see if I can get a little bit more. All right. Let's see here. My screen is mirrored. You guys see here? All right. That's a little bit of feedback. Let's see if I can get a little bit more. I need to flip it. All right, so good. Okay. All right, I don't know about flipping it, but that is some good feedback. In fact, all right, let me give you a little bit better feedback. Maybe, are you looking for it this way? Can you see it better that way?
Yes, we can see it better. But on the wallpaper, it's like flipped.
It's flipped. Okay, gotcha. All right, well, I'll use it this way then. All right, I'm actually looking for feedback a little bit faster, waiting just a little bit to get those responses. So I want feedback to come in a little bit faster. I also want a little bit more specific feedback on what you're looking for, on how your day is going. I also would like more quantity. So on the performance feedback sheet that my company gave me, these are the 3 metrics that we had. So pretty much I'm just checking the boxes. I want faster feedback, I want more specific, and I want greater quantity. So let me ask that question again. If you guys can tell me how your day is going, you can give me a little bit of feedback on how you're feeling today. Go ahead and put in the chat box. I'm going to give you 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3, 2, 1. All right, very insightful. So far, so good. All right. Okay, that's some pretty good feedback. Actually, that's a lot better than whenever I first asked the question. So with that improvement, I'm actually going to give you a 7 out of 10. We're going to use a Likert scale, but I'm going to give you a little bit more specific feedback. Actually, I'm looking for descriptive words that begin with the letter A. So awesome, amazing. Any word that begins with the letter A. I'm also looking for 3 words. So our company standard is we want to have the right amount of quantity in the words that we're using. We don't want to overflow our clients. We don't want to underserve them. 3 is really our organizational standard. So 3 words that begin with the letter A. And this time, as far as speed goes, I am looking for all of my answers within 10 seconds. Okay. This is a lot more feedback than whenever I first gave you a 4 out of 10. Now we know specifically what I am looking for. We have a lot of feedback to answer this question. So let me ask one more time. as a speaker, I am trying to get a pulse to see how we are feeling today. So in a minute, I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to have you spend 10 seconds telling me how your day is in the chat box. Ready? Go. Ten seconds. 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Oh man. Okay, those were some great words. Okay, awesome. I got a lot more than 3. That was awesome. Good A words. See, we are only 5 minutes into this presentation, and we have already been given feedback so that we can improve the performance and the answers that we are given. Dare I say, I would give that a 10 out of 10. As stated before, my name is Amber Vanderburg, and I am the founder of the Pathwayz group, and we do work with teams all over the world, improving the way that they improve performance. So we work to help teams be more efficient, more effective, and have a more enjoyable workplace. But my story today actually begins way before the Pathwayz group. In fact, it begins in 2016. I was actually working in corporate America, in corporate human resources, and I was finishing my master's degree in organizational dynamics, and I was also finishing my term as student government president. And upon graduation, I actually left my job to become the only American, to become the only female, to become the only blonde academy football coach or soccer coach for the Adidas Game Day Academies and Paris Saint-Germain Academies in Bangalore, India, to coach widely the first generation of athletes on both an elite and a grassroots level. I coached about a dozen teams, mostly boys with a few girls, ages 6 to about 16. And as I got off the plane, I discovered that our teams were operating under a very strict command-obey dynamic. See, oftentimes our players would come to our sessions and they would stand in a line, kick a ball, wait for instruction. And they would come to our sessions and they would stand in a line, kick a ball, wait for direction. They would do this over and over again. And while this may have been an efficient way to teach a skill, in a game scenario, it was a disaster. Oftentimes, our players, within the course of a game, within the course of a match, would kick the ball perfectly, exactly the way that we taught them, and then before the play was even over, they turned to the sideline to the coach for further direction and feedback. See, they had mastered the task, but they didn't quite understand how it applied to the overall game scenario. And so in this, we had to make a shift to create an environment for great performance. And see, great performance feedback begins with an environment for great performance, whether that be the environment being having the right tools, having the right processes, or in our case, having the right communication. And this was not a massive overhaul. It wasn't a dramatic change in our communication. It wasn't a dramatic change in our feedback. In reality, it was a slight pivot. So rather than stand in a line, kick a ball, wait for instruction, we would provide challenges. So from here, kick the ball to knock down those 3 cones. Because in order to do that, you're going to have to kick with power and precision. And in a game scenario, whenever you pass, whenever you kick, whenever you shoot, you're also going to have to kick with power and precision. See, what we did is we stopped. We stopped commanding the how, and we started clearly communicating the what and the why. In reality, this was a simple shift. We knew what we were doing. We were kicking the ball to knock down those 3 cones, but we knew why we were doing it, because we wanted to kick with power and precision. And so great performance feedback begins with creating an environment for great performance. Now, whenever we created that environment for more opportunities for the house, specifically within our processes and within our methods and within our projects and within our roles, we actually found that we had a lot of debates within this. See, with an opportunity for ownership also came a greater opportunity for conflict. but it also came a greater opportunity for conversation over complacency. See, from challenges like kick the ball to knock down these 3 cones, I saw some of the most heated debates I've ever seen amongst 7-year-olds, trying to decide if the best way to kick the ball was with the infoot or with the laces. In reality, both ways were right. And so we were able to expand our toolbox of resources for our players to improve upon their performance. See, sorry, let me give our visuals. See, we are going to communicate what we are doing and why we are doing it. And then we have this space in between for opportunities for ownership within the how. But with those opportunities for ownership within the how does come that opportunity for conversations over complacency. See, whenever we were teaching only one way to kick the ball, there was only one way to kick the ball. But with an opportunity for ownership, we had at least 2. Now, we didn't want to just create an environment that might have that was going to have more conflict and not actually prepare our players to engage in that conflict in a meaningful way. So the voice is echoing. I don't know.
Let me try that. Can you hear me a little bit better now? Yes. Perfect. Okay. That was an easy fix. Okay. Great. Awesome. See, we wanted to create we wanted to help our players to engage in conflict in a more meaningful manner. And so we actually first took a moment to identify what those team dynamics were. So there's actually some tools that you can use within your team to identify your team dynamics. So so at the Pathwayz group, we have a myriad of ways that we can assess different communication styles, different work styles, different ways that we come up with ideation, which is powerful, especially if you're on front-end development, if you're a designer, knowing those imaginative and those ideation patterns are really powerful. A simple thing that I do within teams is at the beginning of a project or coming into a new team, I have my players or I have my teammates take a note card. And on the front of the note card, we actually write areas in which Winston can contribute to the project or to the team. And then on the opposite side of the card, we actually write areas in which we hope that there is somebody else on the team that has strength. And so they have an area that can complement us. I'll give you an example. I am a big picture visionary type of person. And so this can be a huge benefit to a team. But I also really hope that there's going to be somebody on our team that is more detail oriented and that is very good with the follow through. And see, these are areas that we are more than likely going to complement each other. A visionary person also needs somebody that can see the trees as well. So we're more than likely going to complement each other, but we're also more than likely going to have conflict. And so before the conflict even arises, we know that there's going to be conflict, and we know specifically where that conflict is probably going to lie. And so there are different ways you can actually predict where that conflict within your team performance will more than likely lie within your team. And so from this, we are able to engage in proactive conversations. Now, proactive conversations are actually just a simple 5 to 10 minute conversation that I have with my team at the beginning of a project, coming into a new team. I also have this conversation whenever I am meeting with a new client. And a proactive conversation goes like this. At some point in this project, I'm probably going to fail you. At some point in this relationship, there's probably going to be a conflict. There's going to be tension. There's going to be heat. And so while the emotions are low now, let us proactively discuss how we are going to handle this situation. And this does a couple really powerful things. First, it acknowledges that conflict is going to happen. It creates a normalcy with that. And oftentimes with performance, we don't want to address unmet performance expectations because we don't really want to engage in that confrontation. Don't want to admit that there's a problem. But by having a proactive conversation, you're saying from the beginning that unmet performance expectations might happen. And so it creates a normalcy. The second thing that it does, it creates a script, and it creates something that you can operate off of. So it's not a mystery. There's not ambiguity of how you will address the conversation. You already have agreed. You have a mutually agreed values on how you're going to handle that conversation. And so it can create a little bit of clarity whenever those unmet expectations or undesired performance can arise. Now, now whenever we are engaging in those proactive conversations, it's actually really powerful also because it helps us to overcome one of the greatest barriers to great performance feedback, and that is the fundamental attribution error. Now, the fundamental attribution error is really just a fancy way of saying that too oftentimes we judge other people by their behavior while we judge ourselves by our intentions. Right now, with many teams working at home, with most teams working remotely, it can be very easy to see only the behavior within the team and not exactly know what that intention is. I'll give you an example. I was working with a team, and we had a team member that would come to meetings and was often seen as abrupt. He was seen as abrasive. Some even said malicious. People hated whenever he came to the meetings. And so, rather than coming in and immediately reprimanding the behavior, we began with this simple question. What is your intention? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to convey whenever you come to meetings? And in fact, the young man was trying to be persuasive. He was trying to be passionate. He was trying to be convincing, and there was no intended abrupt or abrasiveness. And so in this scenario, we actually had a knowledge gap between the perceived behavior and the intended behavior. And so we were able to address this undesired behavior from a coaching standpoint rather than a policing standpoint or being the principal's office. We were able to actually partner with that individual and work with him to really match that knowledge gap between the intended behavior and trying to be passionate and persuasive and what was perceived. And so by asking this question of, hey, what's going on? What was your intention? What are you trying to do? In a very genuine way, it actually creates a different dynamic whenever we are addressing, say, undesired performance within your team. Now, how do we know what performance is desired? How do we clearly communicate that? We don't really want what the original performance feedback that we got, which was a 4 out of 10, didn't have a lot of feedback to go with that. See, great performance feedback begins with the environment of great performance. And that includes laying out what the performance expectations are for your team. Now, performance expectations, especially in this time, could include your performance outcomes. So what are your deliverables at the end of the week, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the day? But it could also be things such as, what is your expectations for arriving at meetings on time? What is your expectations for responding to emails? Is it, within the hour? Is it by the end of the day? What are those expectations as well? I'd love to see if anyone wants to put in the chat some other ways you can really clarify the expectations so that people know what is expected of them whenever they receive their feedback. So one thing that whenever I have worked in teams, we have created very clear expectations, such as when we arrive to meetings. We've created expectations on how, what dress is appropriate, what attitude is expected. If I'm going to be an employee at Disney World, there's a huge expectation that whenever someone walks into the door, I'm going to be friendly and I'm going to be very kind. And there's an attitude expectation there as well. And so one thing that you can do is you set those expectations very clearly. You can also work with your team to lay out what those expectations are. So sometimes I begin that conversation by asking, hey, if I want to improve as a developer, what type of feedback would be the most beneficial to help me improve in my profession? And phrasing the questions that way, again, comes at the, approaches the conversation with more of a partnership, and it really allows for more of a coaching opportunity. So laying those expectations from the beginning is very important. See, unmet expectations are going to happen within teams, but uncommunicated expectations are doomed to be unmet. We have to establish what those expectations are from the beginning and communicate them very clearly. Now, whenever we are working within our teams and giving our feedback, we've clearly laid out what our expectations are. We have had a proactive conversation. We've assessed our team dynamics and really seen, okay, this is where conflict might lie within our team. This is where we might have areas of complement and areas of conversation over complacency. Now, we're actually going into the actual feedback within our team. See, whenever it comes to performance feedback, there are three major purposes. So the first purpose of feedback is to correct desired behavior. We're going to correct desired behavior. So let me take these down. We're going to correct desired behavior. The second reason, the second purpose behind performance feedback is to encourage or to encourage more desired behavior. So correct undesired behavior, encourage desired behavior, and then to coach or to build upon desired behavior, build upon behavior. And these are the three main purposes of feedback: to correct, to encourage, and to coach. And knowing your purpose of feedback can act as a really powerful guideline as you are giving that performance feedback within your team. Have this conversation with yourself before you go into that performance feedback conversation. So am I going into this conversation to correct undesired behavior? Am I going into this conversation to encourage or to encourage desired behavior? Or am I trying to build upon some desired behavior? Now, in any three of these cases, it's really important that we get specific so we can get strategic. I'll give you an example from the soccer field. You might be OCD like me. From the soccer field. See, in all three of these purposes, it's important that we get specific in our performance feedback so that we can get strategic to improve our performance. As a football coach, I often recall coming home from games whenever teams were victorious. And so the coach would go up to his players and say, hey, good game, good job, keep up the good work. And that all sounds really good, but the players actually don't have any meaningful feedback that they know what behavior they should continue. Saying good job sounds nice, but it doesn't serve any of these three purposes. We might be encouraged, but we don't know what behavior is being encouraged and what behavior should be continued. I also recall one time I was coaching a young boys football team, and we had a young lad that always loved coming into our sessions, coming in during halftime whenever we were down, whenever we were losing, and he had the exact answer that we needed to win the football match. He would come into the locker room and he would say, guys, we just need to play better. And while that may have been true, it wasn't any sort of specific feedback that we knew what we needed to correct. So we needed to be more specific to be strategic. The same goes with coaching. And so a better way to approach this conversation is, yes, we do need to play better. How can we play better? Well, the other team, we keep on turning the ball over. And the other team keeps on getting the ball. Okay, what can we do better there? Oh, well, if we make better passes, then the other team will have a harder time getting the ball. How can we make better passes? Well, if we get our head up and actually see where we're kicking, more than likely to make better passes. Okay, that was only 3 different questions that I needed to ask of, okay, what can we do specifically better? What action steps can we take? Why specifically is this happening? And by asking these sorts of questions on any 3 of these purposes, we're able to give more specific feedback within our teams. So remember, the purpose is to coach, to correct, and to encourage behavior. It's important that we get specific so that we can get strategic in improving our performance within our team. Last thing, which I'm sure some of you guys are very much interested about, is a lot of this is conversation-wise. So we're actually talking about the communication side. What do we do as far as the data side? Who is giving the feedback? See, as a coach, I should not be the only voice on the field. In reality, there are times whenever I should not be the loudest voice on the field. There are other people within the team that have insights that I do not. They have relationships and they have different insights that I cannot see from the sideline. They might be on the pitch, they might be in the stands. And so it's important that we have a wide variety of feedback from a wide variety of people. And from this, I really encourage teams to give feedback ownership. Now, in some organizations, this is a 360 review, but the idea of feedback ownership is giving the feedback power, not just to yourself as the leader, but it's actually giving it to other people within the team. So with this, I really encourage teams to set those expectations as a team. So then you have greater buy-in within what we're actually being measured on within our performance. And then you have, and then providing your team with the right tools to give that feedback effectively. So again, for some teams that is a 360 review. For some, it's having, say, a quick stand up and asking for that feedback. So it does look a little bit different in every team. In any case, there's a huge question on how often we should give this feedback. Now, traditionally, in some organizations, there is this thing called the annual review. Now, don't let those fall. Now, the annual review goes like this. See, See, in the annual review, we begin work in January and we work February, March, April, COVID hits, June, July, August, September, October, November, and then bam, in December, we get one big performance review. And we discuss things in December of things that happened all the way in February. And this is not the most productive way to give that performance feedback. Now, I am not of the opinion that annual reviews should be abolished altogether. In fact, I think that we can actually reimagine them. So instead, we actually have a performance review that is done in series. So I recommend either every other month or quarterly reviews. So that's going to be 4 to 6 times a year. That is enough time within a team to receive feedback, to digest it, to make the required change or to make the adjustment that is suggested in the feedback, and for the team to notice. So giving that's a lot to happen. And it generally does take about a month minimum. Sometimes it does take 2 or 3 months for that entire process to happen, for feedback to be received, for it to be digested. So if someone says, hey, you're being too abrupt in meetings, I'm receiving that feedback. I need to digest it, come up with some sort of game plan to make the required adjustment. And then there has to be time for the team to really notice that change. And so we want to have quick feedback loops, but we do want to have a span of time within that. So I suggest, either bi-monthly or quarterly reviews. And then the annual review that you have at the end is actually just a summation of all of the feedback that you have been getting throughout the year. And so there isn't anything additional that you're doing in the annual review. It's really just a summation. It's a compilation of all of the feedback that you've been getting from, from different teammates and from your leadership within the team. So on a formal basis, as far as what formal feedback looks like, this is a more suggested manner. Generally, I've seen some feedback, as we looked at the very beginning, it's more on a Likert scale. It's just checking boxes. There is value in actually giving feedback in a writing very personal feedback. Again, you can't get specific to get strategic if we're just checking boxes. So there is value in having an actual place to give that specific feedback. Now, we recognize that we don't want to spend 15,000 hours every other quarter giving this feedback. So whenever I lay those expectations on what we're going to measure our performance on, I limit it to 4 to 6 questions. And so from there, I'm actually able to get my feedback done per person about 15 minutes per person. So I realize if you have, 30 people on your team, that can still be a lot. But if you're putting that 15 minutes per person, that's going to be about the same that you're spending at the end of the year review. And this is going to be more specific feedback that's going to actually affect performance. I actually did this in one team, a consulting team that we were working with, and we actually gave feedback every other month, and it was a lot. I think that quarterly is a little bit more feasible for many organizations. It just depends on the size, but we did it every other month. And after 2 years' time, there was new and coming into the organization, and those that had been getting that feedback on how to participate, on how they were seen as a team member and what they were contributing to the team within that 2 years' time. So there was a huge difference in the way that we performed. And so that's only 2 years. After 1 year, we saw a significant difference. After 2 years, it was a completely different team. And so that's really, in the long run, that's not a huge amount of time that is going to have a huge effect on the way that your team is communicating, how they're collaborating, the expected outcomes that they have as team members. And it really has just a powerful effect on your overall team dynamics. Again, we're looking at efficiency, effectiveness, and enjoyability as it affects your retention and sustainability within your organization. Now, this is formal. This is really addressing formal feedback. What do we do? And we've talked about this just a little bit, especially with proactive conversations. But what do we do specifically when performance expectations are unmet? What do we do whenever we see undesired performance behavior? See, oftentimes we've had the proactive conversation on maybe what we're going to say. There's something really powerful. There's something really powerful in the way that we are communicating that message. So communicating that message, the method that we use is is just as important as the message that we use. So if you have undesired performance expectations, understand that this is on an emotional scale. So there's a difference between something that is, say, not very emotional, say, reports are due on Friday. The method of communication here could be an email, a text, a memo. Doesn't need to be anything, doesn't need to be a meeting, doesn't really need to be a phone call. This can be very, very informational, not as emotional. On the other end, if there is unmet expectations, it is important to be as personal as possible. So a Zoom call, a phone call, someday in the future in person, and try to be as personal as you can so that you can get quicker feedback, so that you can really display that empathy and you can have a meaningful conversation. So oftentimes the message of communication and the message of performance feedback is given a lot of attention. I really want you to also acknowledge the method of communication. One of my favorite authors, Dr. Mark Rutland, he actually writes that great communication comes down to the right message to the right audience in the right way at the right time. So keep that in mind as you are giving your team. Someone has to repeat that. All right, the right message, the right way, to the right audience, in the right time. So last story that I want to explain, last story for today. We've gone over a lot of different types of performance feedback. But see, I recall one time whenever I was actually in India and I was coaching a young team, and a young lad came out and his name was Achintya, and he was about 6 years old. And he came running out onto the field and he began yelling, "Pass, pass, pass!" And I noticed that Achintya was yelling pass even whenever the other team had the ball. And he was yelling pass whenever he was miles away from the action. And he was yelling pass even whenever he had the ball. And so he was running with the ball going, "Pass, pass, pass!" And so I looked at Achintya and I said, "Achintya, why are you yelling pass?" And he looked up at me and he said, "Miss Umber, I do not know what it means. I only know it is a football word." And see, we've learned a lot of different words today. We've learned a lot of different methods. And oftentimes, I hear leaders sound a little bit like my friend Achintya, yelling, "Performance, feedback, 360 evaluations. We need to have proactive conversations. Evaluate team dynamics. Yeah, go!" And these sound like good words, but if we're not in the right position, and if we're miles away from the action, then saying these words are not only ineffective, but they can actually be detrimental to our overall communication within the team. Eventually, the team is gonna tune you out. But if we take the time to first lay a foundation of great performance and lay an environment of great performance within our team, if we take the time to clearly communicate our what and our why, and allow for opportunities for ownership within the how, within our processes and our methods and our projects and our role, if we take the time to really see those team dynamics and ways that we can complement each other, ways that we might actually have conflict, and ways that there might be gaps within our performance, and we can have these proactive conversations so that we can give great performance feedback within our team. If we take the time to clearly communicate our expectations and know the purpose behind our performance feedback, whether we're coaching, we're encouraging, and we're correcting behavior. If we take the time to really understand our timelines and the way we're collecting data within our performance feedback, and if we take the time to communicate our feedback in a meaningful manner, then we'll be in a position to yell pass, to receive the ball, to move forward, and to score really big goals. Thank you all so much for having me here today. I think I do have a couple of minutes left. So I'd love to have any questions that you all have.
Thank you so much, Amber, for such an insightful session. Hope everyone enjoyed a lot. If you have any question, actually we are running out of time, so only one or two questions we can take. So please write your answer here, or you can just speak up.
Hi, Amber, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, we can
Hi,
hear you.
Maxwell. Yeah.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi.
So, thank you for this session. It was really engaging and really like the way you are not using a slide. It's very, very up to our face. I have one question, actually not a question. It was really fun to find out that my organization is agile because we are doing every 4 months. But it's very, very mechanical because what I see is it's a shift from last 2 years that we used to do yearly, now we're doing quarterly. But it's just for the sake of doing. It's not really practiced. I mean, it's like, okay, we will do it next quarter, but now just let us get through this quickly. But the mindset is still about the annual one. So how to shift from this? Actually, I'm also doing this similar thing with my team, but it's top down, right? So how to really help us?
Yeah. So I think that it's really powerful to look at what you're measuring first. So if it's so two things, looking at the types of feedback that you're giving. So if it's more of okay, did you meet the metrics this month? If it's mostly on a Likert scale, then that doesn't give a lot of feedback to make change. It's just more of an assessment. And so that's really where the specific feedback comes into play. So that's really where I begin seeing the change in that regard. And then secondly, actually defining what those performance metrics are. I've seen that defining it through the team has been much more powerful and has a lot more buy-in than coming from top down. Obviously, there are some ways that you can do some quality assurance and do, you do want to have continuity within the data that you're collecting. But if you have a conversation with your team on, okay, what do we want to be measured on? Then there's a little bit more buy-in on, I have a little bit more in stake with this. So that has a little bit more meat to it than going through the motions. As you said, so it has a little bit more of a different mindset than we're collecting feedback and we're collecting that data. It's more of a feedback loop. So I'm collecting that data so that I can make that change, so that we can reassess again. And so it creates more of a loop. Teammates ignore feedback. Oh, that's a really good question. I do want to be respectful of our time. Yes, so whenever teammates ignore feedback, so I first have, it depends on what type of feedback is being ignored, and if it's being ignored or blatantly ignored, like, oh, this isn't a problem, or blatantly ignored in laziness. So there's kind of a I don't really care, or that's not a problem at all. Those are two different types of ignoring feedback. So if it is I don't really care about this feedback, then I have a conversation to actually talk about those team dynamics and those full value contracts. That's why having the proactive conversation and setting those expectations early is really important. If it is, so I really put it more in the fact of, it's not just you, you're part of a larger team. And so this feedback, we don't want to be lackadaisical about it. We actually do want to take it seriously. If it's actively being, so that's passive ignorance. If it's actively being ignored, so this is not a problem, then I actually address it from a standpoint of continuous improvement, which frames the conversation slightly different, but you're more than likely to have you're actually greatly more likely to have more buy-in from a point of, then you go from correcting to coaching. So it just makes a slight shift in that communication, but it changes the dynamic of the conversation significantly.
So we're taking this as a last question.
Okay. Taking this last one. Okay, awesome. Awesome. So let's see here. Generally performance feedback. Review. That is a great question. Yeah. So the question was performance appraisal feedback is tied up with salary review, and as a result, most of the team ignores and feels lazy to give 360 feedback every morning. So I would honestly have a greater conversation to give more purpose to the feedback than salary review. So that is something that is, a very small part. I actually did this with the team that it did come with salary review. So we did want to, get our passing scores, of course, but we had actually even a greater focus on our team performance. So it was, okay, you want to, this is within your personal salary, but the team also got additional bonuses within that as well. And so there really was a greater incentive for the team to perform well and give performance feedback in terms of improving performance rather than individuals. So there's a big difference between a scorecard and a scoreboard. And we see that as I've coached sports. I had to give out scorecards, but the scoreboard is really what we were caring about. And so it's really where you're placing that incentive and where you're placing that focus. I put some emphasis. You might use some of that scorecard to address salary, but if you actually place a greater emphasis on the scoreboard, it's a slight organizational adjustment. It can actually refocus the team and have a greater incentive to have those conversations in a different mindset.
Great.
Awesome.
Great answers.
If you guys have any other questions, feel free to look me up. Amber Vanderburg. I'm on LinkedIn. So it was so great to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day. It was a pleasure having you on this event. Okay. All right. So everyone, even you, Amber, please join us in room 1. I have already messaged here with a link. So we are going for the closing ceremony for the day. So please join in room 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you.